Welcome to Play and Talk. It's Friday as we're recording this. You may not be listening to this on Friday. That's the great thing about podcasts. And really one of the surprising things when I started the podcast is how much like older episodes still get listened to. Like people go back and listen to a lot of the past episodes. So I want to say for those of you who are doing that, thank you. I'm really glad you're following our work. We got a busy show today. Of course, there was the debate last night. We're going to have some things to say about that. Joining us in a moment here is State Representative Brandy Pyle. She's a Republican from District 22 in beautiful Casselton, North Dakota. We're going to be talking with her about a rule she's implemented as chair of a committee in the legislature, which is kind of interesting about being distracted. Also later in the show, big news out of the North Dakota University system. They're moving on from Chancellor Mark Hagerott. The Chancellor is going to be joining us on the show to talk about that coming up a little bit later. And then Chad and I at the end, we don't usually, if we do two guests, we don't have a lot of time. We make a little extra time today to talk about that debate because things need to be said about it.
Things need to be said. Nice way of putting it, Rob.
The thing is, I don't like presidential debates that much. I really don't like, a lot of these candidate debates, I don't see the point. Like, I don't think they really change. Unless somebody just does something really terrible, I don't really think they change anybody's mind, and I don't know how illuminating they were. I will say, I don't know, Brandy, did you watch the debate last night?
Yeah, we watched it.
I will say I had two reactions. First of all, I loved the format, and I hope that's the format going forward. Get the audience out. We don't need people hooting and hollering in the background. Mute the microphone of the other person so it's not just crosstalk. Let each candidate answer the question. And I thought the moderators did great. I hope that's the format going forward. But holy cow, was Joe Biden. If that guy showed up at your house on Thanksgiving, you wouldn't let him help in the kitchen. You would escort him to an easy chair so he can nod off while he watches the Macy's parade. This is not somebody, I don't know, watching that, we'll get into this later in the show, but watching that is not somebody that I thought is up to doing what is frankly the most difficult job in the world.
So what do you want to respond to that, Rob?
Representative Pyle, let's hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, pretty much. He would be a person I would usher to the easy chair, sit down and just kind of have everybody come and say hi to make sure Grandpa was acknowledged. And then when it was time to eat, he'd be assisted to the dinner table and somebody would plate the meal for him and kind of guide him through the meal. And
well, I really did.
Rob, you know what I'd do with Donald Trump if he came to my house for Thanksgiving?
Kick him out.
I would take the 34 felony, guy charged or civilly charged with sexual assault, who tried to perform a coup on January 6th. I would not let him in my house.
Yeah.
I would lock the door so he would not come in.
I don't disagree with you. I would let Joe Biden in my house because I think he's a nice man. My policy disagreements with him aside, I wouldn't let Trump in my house. But anyway, we're going to get into all this later. We didn't bring Representative Pyle on.
Randy comes on this thing.
He just gets gets waylaid with that. Anyway, I asked Brandy to come on the show because she, in her a recent meeting of the Administrative Rules Committee, of which she's the chair, she implemented a rule. She called it an experiment when she pitched it to her fellow lawmakers. And she wanted a device-free meeting, as in no cell phones, no smartwatches. I just got a smartwatch for my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so proud of it. I love it. But obviously, you need your computer maybe to do the committee work or whatever, but, stay off Facebook. And I thought that was kind of interesting because this whole living a distracted life. You go to a school play or something and there's parents who are not watching their kids on the stage. They're reading Facebook or something, distraction is everywhere.
Everywhere.
So tell me a little bit about that, Brandy. Why did you, I guess I know why, but tell us,
Yeah, the idea came from the Dakota Medical Foundation. They held a symposium a while back that I attended. They brought in the author of a book and talked about digital addiction. And it's addiction is addiction. So it doesn't matter if it's drugs or pornography or digital addiction. It affects our brains in the same manner. And what we were talking about is with the digital addiction, it's really affecting our younger peoples. So we, as a lot of times as parents, give the cell phones to our younger kids, and it's really affecting how they are interacting with free play. So they don't know how to hold a conversation. They don't know how to argue properly, that kind of thing. So I've kind of just been playing around with it. I do a substitute teach over at Central Cass. Every once in a while, we do have a policy where the kids have to put away their cell phones. And one day I had a gym class, and I was a cell phone taker. I was not the popular fun substitute, which I enjoy being. I like to play with the kids and ask them questions, but I did have to take some cell phones, and they all knew the rule that they got it back after the class period. And I said, well, you get it back at the office. I said, I am just a substitute. You can go talk to the principal. I said, it's just going to be how it is. But they were very confrontational, very angry. It was in April, so they should know the rule. They should know the policy. I shouldn't have to do what I had to do. And the schools are pretty dang good about enforcing this rule. So if we are expecting our kids to follow a policy that we want them free of these devices, then why don't we try modeling it as adults? And so I thought, oh my gosh, well, we have a 4-hour meeting. And so I had our IT staff kind of go in front and show them how to mute our emails. And he kind of giggled at me. He said, are you serious? I said, oh yes, I am very, very serious. Let's mute these. I said, it's 4 hours, and we had breaks designed into the meeting. So if they had to take phone calls or had to do emails or meet with somebody, it was all designed that they could. And in observing the meeting, there's more talk, there's more interaction. And does it get a little loud? Absolutely. But that's okay. I think I will deal with that, and I will take the conversation over people looking down at their devices and ignoring the people that they're present with.
Brandy, I think this is absolutely fascinating, and I'm glad you brought up schools, because it's not in all schools where cell phones are removed.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, I was talking to a group of teachers probably the last week of school, and it was high school teachers, and they essentially said it's the biggest problem that they have in schools is students who are addicted to their cell phones. But when they try to take them away, the people who are most angry are parents, because parents have a tendency to text their kids during the school day and that type of thing. These teachers would love if there's a statewide ban on cell phones in public schools in North Dakota. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I found this rule fascinating because I don't know how to say this any differently, but are you treating your colleagues like children where they need to be told what they can and cannot do, and they need to focus on doing their job?
Kind of in a way. There was no punishment. It was a simple ask, because I do understand that sometimes emergencies come up, and some of them, like our cell phones, are devices for monitoring glucose levels for our diabetics. And so everything has an exception. But yeah, and one of them actually called me mom, and I said, no, it's Mrs. Pyle. This is how we work it in school. But I mean, even in our own house, it's learning to be present with the people that we're with. In one of the books that I read, a lot of this epidemic came from the first generation of the Apple phone in 2010, and how people have just started just not interacting properly with one another and not having conversation. I would say we're really good keyboard warriors. We wouldn't say some of this stuff face to face to people that people actually write about one another, and we just hide. And I don't think it's okay. So, is it my one person mission to kind of change it a little bit? Yeah. I don't know if I would support a ban. I would support school districts choosing to make those choices, and I would fully back them up. But I believe in local control and making those decisions. And whatever they needed from me as a state legislator, I would absolutely give my support for that. But I don't want it to be top down. This has to be a local choice. And whatever is done in Fargo is different in Central Cass and Northern Cass Kindred. All of those places are a little bit different.
One thing that whenever something like this comes up, I look at it from the perspective of smartphones are still a relatively new addition to our lives, and to me it's always more about how do you learn how to cope with this? Because on one hand, it is enormously convenient for me to be able to text my daughter and tell her, hey, I'm going to be 15 minutes late picking you up. You're going to have to hang out, or can you walk home with so and so, or her to text me and say, Dad, I forgot my textbook. Can you drop it by the school? Or Dad, can you put lunch money in my lunch account because you forgot again? Stuff like that. It's really convenient, and I don't want to lose that.
Right.
And so to me, it's about like, how do we get people so that the right time to pick up your phone and the right time to just leave it be and pay attention to what you're doing. That's the that's the hard thing. I'm the eternal optimistic because I think that we're gonna like honestly, I think it's where we always talk about like what the kids are doing. I look at from my mind, I think adults are worse about it. And I think succeeding generations are going to be better because they're going to have grown up with it and they're going to have had more of a chance to develop a healthy lifestyle with it. And I say this, I'm a total offender. I mean, the nature of my job, I am getting texts and phone calls at all hours, at all times. It is not at all unusual to see me get up from the dinner table and go into another room for an hour and a half to talk to somebody. I mean, but that's just the nature of my job. But I get it. I mean, I get sucked into it too, and it's hard, but to me, it's more about figuring out like, how do we live with this and how do we like make conscious choices to be better with it?
I think that's absolutely correct. It's being conscious of the choices and then being conscious of who you're with and dedicating time aside from that cell phone and learning to just kind of shut it off every once in a while. I will fully admit I struggle with it too. I was in government finance last week, and I ended up getting a phone call twice. And so I grabbed the phone and I ran out, and it was the bus picking my son up for camp, wondering where he was. And I was like, you got to call my husband. I'm in Bismarck. I can't help you. That type of thing. But he did I'm like, good gravy, guys. You have one job to get him to the bus for the week. And
Brandy's poor husband. I hope he doesn't listen to this. There's a bit of bearing agreement.
We're just like,
they got him there.
Light him up, Brandy.
Yeah, they got him there. It was within 2 minutes of making the phone call. But no, they made it all right. But it is just being present, especially, at the dinner table. We struggle in our family. Our kids are just super busy between nannying and all the activities. Just sitting down and having that conversation and that check-in. I think that's very important. I think it's one of those things that we're losing. But we as parents and as community members just have to make that conscious choice to do it. It can't be forced, and we can't be finger pointing saying, oh, you're doing this and you're doing that. But just saying, hey, I'm talking to you. Like, are you listening?
Brandy, I read the message you sent to legislators, and part of it, I felt like you're sending a message to your colleagues that our constituents deserve our attention if they're at the podium. And I'm going to tell a quick story that my father was a legislator. He died while in office. They do that memorial service every year. And it was 1999. And it's obviously before cell phones. But I remember we were invited to this thing, and there's a bunch of legislators who were reading newspapers during the ceremony. And how offended I felt by, you can't focus for 20 minutes while you're recognizing your colleagues. That's accelerated even more when constituents are coming in and there's a hearing that maybe a legislator isn't all that interested in, and so they're buried in their phone or whatever. Do you think that this is like just even the message that you're sending to your colleagues that we have to do better? Do you think that will get them thinking a little bit more? Because I will be honest, I've been very aware if I'm picking up my cell phone during this conversation or not, because we're talking about this. So have you heard from your colleagues? That
I have. Yep, I have. I stopped in at the agriculture meeting the other day, and a few of them who were on my administrative rules have said, I've noticed this, or I noticed you picked up your phone. And I was like, yep. I said, but I don't have the paper copy of your agenda, so I have to look online to follow along. They're like, oh, okay. And I know Senator Myrdal implemented it in her judiciary meeting. And so it's just one of those things that I hope will catch on. And I hope will catch on beyond the legislative environment. Hopefully this will catch on in society. And that's where I think organically it needs to happen. Again, government shouldn't have to dictate this. This should come from us wanting to be a better human being. And I don't know. That's my philosophy. But
what about multitasking though? I mean, you guys have a busy job. I mean, and it can be sometimes. I mean, I don't think we should imply that every lawmaker who picks up a cell phone is,
correct.
texting out
Correct.
dank memes to one another, or
Nope.
or scrolling Facebook, or I mean, sometimes they could be, maybe trying to organize, somebody who's going to show up for testimony in the next agenda item, or they're getting ready for the next committee, or they're trying to research a vote that's going to come up after the committee. I mean, there's a lot of things that they could be doing. They could be texting a columnist or something, some information about what's happening in the committee. This is very important.
We would hate for that to stop, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I would not like that to stop at all. I like getting in fact, I have a funny story. Back when Al Carlson was still the majority leader in the House, he had some bills to create a state-owned casino or some sort of state-owned gambling enterprise. And I was admittedly kind of lighting him up on about it. And I was getting a lot of information about what was coming up. And so apparently he was having a caucus meeting. And in the caucus meeting, he was telling people, stop talking to Rob Port. Like, stop texting him this information. Meanwhile, 4 people in the caucus meeting were live texting this to me at the same time. So I don't want that to stop if I can be. So, but I mean, sometimes I think we forget that cell phones are a tool that do make our lives easier. It's not all just wasting time on Reddit. I really get a lot of extra stuff done. I can do a lot more because I have my smartphone, and it makes my ability to communicate with my wife and my children and the people that I'm working with a lot easier. I'm really glad they exist for that reason. I mean, I can get up and spend more time with my family sometimes because we use Slack internally at the forum, right? Mm-hmm. So if I file a story, I could get up and walk away from my desk and maybe go spend a little time with one of my kids, go outside for a little bit. And if they have a follow-up, I get an alert on my phone. And I could answer their question quick in 30 seconds, and then I don't have to go back to my desk or wait at my desk for it to get published. That enables me to do more. So there's that side of it as well.
Absolutely. And I would totally agree with that. There are pros and cons on everything. So it is a great tool in the toolbox for productivity and for business and communication. When we travel for overseas and everything, there's, the features that you can call overseas and not have to pay $1 million for international calls anymore. So it can be great. I think we just have to be conscious of also being present with the people we're with. So that's my message.
Yeah, and I don't interpret this as you being anti-technology or anti any of these devices.
Me neither.
Yeah, more about you getting focused. I think, Rob, you brought up a good point about sort of technology native folks who are sort of living up in this world, and then maybe the generation where Facebook and social media is new to them. I mean, I'm thinking about my mother and people her age. Now, I'm not talking about my mom right now, but I do find that maybe people of that generation struggle a little bit more with the addiction and sort of scrolling through Facebook mindlessly when there's other things going on. So, I mean, do you agree that maybe generationally that people might handle this differently, and it's not necessarily the kids that are the problem here?
Yep. Each generation has a different definition of work, definition of communication, definition of, events in their life that define their generation. And so I would also agree that technology and addiction looks a little bit different for each generation on that. I think my mom would struggle with that too. She's a big Heyday fan.
What's
she's
Heyday?
That's building that farm.
Oh.
It's a game. She plays it. I accidentally introduced it to her so we could farm together. And then I quit playing and she continues to play, which is fine. I mean, she enjoys it. It makes her happy type of thing.
I have a relative who I'm not gonna name, although I guess they're gonna know who they are, who plays a slot machine game on their, and it's just, they just push a button.
Yeah.
And then the slot machine things come up, and then they win fake money, and then they or lose fake money, I guess, and then they just hit the button again, and that's the game. That's the whole game.
Yeah.
Which I guess is not any different. I mean, at least when you go to Las Vegas, like, people bring you drinks while you're just sitting there pushing the button. I don't understand slot machines, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make.
Brandy, can I shift us just slightly off of this subject to the measure to eliminate property taxes? I think you have an interesting perspective as the former city auditor at Casselton, correct? And obviously now as a state legislator. Can you talk about your perspective on this as a local government official, somebody who substitutes schools and teacher in Casselton, and as a state legislator? Can you talk about sort of where you're at, what are your concerns or things you like about it?
I'm very concerned about it. I've seen different things where there would be at least 7 additional bills to fix the initiated measure, and that's just a first blush at it. A lot of the you have to put up local money for a match from the state. I mean, every grant program would have to be rewritten. I believe you have to have responsibility and authority within a governing entity to be fair. So one would have the authority and the other would have to be the responsibility. And so if we as the state decided, I just don't feel you need to do your streets, then we just line item that out and you're just not going to get the money. We meet every 2 years, and what are you going to do? It makes me a little nervous. I always still believe in local control. It is very difficult in those political subdivisions to fully understand the cost, how it's spread out, what word am I thinking of? The special assessments. It isn't perfect. And then when you have the rapid growth like Horace and Fargo, West Fargo, on the eastern side, it's a lot of money. And then you throw in the diversion, and so then prices are up 30% for any other project because they're taking all of the contractors. It's not easy. And so planned growth is hard, but then you have somebody coming in and wanting to put in a business. So then you react. So, for example, in Casselton, we're getting the soybean crushing plant. So for the past 2 years, our district and the local political subdivisions have worked hard to redo the overpass that would direct traffic not through Casselton, but around Casselton. It was a 22-foot wide overpass. So basically what we were hearing from our semi-truck drivers is they would clip mirrors. And so now we're going to have a 44-foot spread overpass. And it'll be flatter. So you could be on one side and not know what was coming from the other side. So if we had combines going across, you were kind of screwed. You were just kind of praying that nobody was coming from the other side. So we were trying to create safety for the community, for the truck drivers, for the soybean plant, ethanol plant, the sugar beet piler, and then we have Grand Farm, who is bringing in 300 cars a day. So we're dealing with a whole conglomerate of traffic. So very excited that we're getting all of this, but the state had to put in money for a new overpass. So we just had to redirect money for that.
And I think the thing is the state can do those things, but these intensely local projects, if we eliminate property taxes, all these debates, these very convoluted debates, are going to get loaded into an 80-day, every 2-year legislative session where a bunch of part-time lawmakers have to go through all this stuff. I mean, it's one thing to say, for them to say, we got this project, here's the state's piece that we're hoping the state will fund for an overpass or new street or something like that. Here's what we want the state to do. It's one thing for the state to, but if it's the whole thing, Like, well, we want to build a new school, and now you're having a legislative committee act as like a school board over it, and hopefully paying attention, not being on their cell phones. I just
good work, Rob. Good work.
See how I brought that around? That's why this is the #1 political podcast in North Dakota. It boggles my mind. Like, if this passes, do you think we'll have to have a full-time legislative session? Like,
Yep, we'll have to have full-time. We'll actually have to have staff. I don't think people realize we don't have any staff. Funny speech, I do. We do have attorneys that do the research, but we share them all. I'm not sure how many staffers we're at right now. And what I would say to that too is, for the legislative districts that have multiple counties, good luck in getting what you need, because there's 33 of us from Cass County.
Oh, I keep seeing 27, so that's good.
No, there's 33. There's 11 districts here that touch Cass County. So I think it would pit urban versus rural, and I don't think rural would come out very well on that, unfortunately, even though my district is rural and that's what I would support. It would be a total cluster.
Hey, Rob, can I switch one more time to a different subject?
Sure, go ahead. Brandy, we've got everything from the debate to
We're talking about one thing. So what are we talking about now?
No, this is fun. So your district has managed to avoid sort of the challenges from the right in your primaries. In District 22, you and Mark Weber and Jonathan Rye.
Sorry.
Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So what do you attribute that to? Why is your district one that hasn't really seen these factions warring on the Republican side of things? Luck, competence?
Yep. I think those two things. A lot of it I think has to do with luck. We're very competent. The three of us work very well. We have different areas of expertise. And we work well as a team. So if I get an email from a constituent, I make sure to update my colleagues so they are informed and know what's going on. Not all districts function that way. There's animosity between them, and it just is what it is. We don't always vote the same way, but we're respectful of one another's votes, so we don't attack one another. It doesn't serve a purpose to treat people that way. So we just don't do that. So, and the world is too small, and North Dakota is too small to behave that way. So we just don't. And in our campaigns, you won't see us behave in the manner that the primary was in other districts. We just don't do that. It's kind of been a tradition that way. I was instilled when I ran back in 2016 that this is how it is. And so every time we brought a new member on, that's what we do.
Brandy, real quick, switching gears again. Who do you think is going to win the World Series?
Well, I'd love for the Twins to win. I used to work for them in college, so I would love to bring them home. So
yeah,
I have no idea. I haven't.
I wish the Yankees could play the Twins again soon, because we are not doing good.
I know
we're in a bad place. Yeah,
I know.
Still, Yankees still have the second best record in the American League.
I know.
Yeah,
Robert, I think we're going to be fine.
We just got swept by the Mets. All right. I had Armstrong in my text. Oh no, he wasn't. He didn't text me at all about that. All right, we're gonna let you go, Brandy. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, and good luck with have a good Fourth, guys. Make good choices.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Welcome back. Just finished up our interview with Representative Brandy Pyle. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about higher education. Now, earlier this week, the State Board of Higher Education approved a plan to transition away from our current Chancellor, Mark Hagerott. Mr. Hagerott joins us now on the show. And the first thing I want to ask is there's some, I don't like the way the board does this. And I don't like the way the State Board of Higher Education does a lot of its business, where it seems like they go behind closed doors. They have a consequential discussion that has significant impacts on the taxpayers in terms of leadership for one of our largest and most expensive branches of government. You're one of the most highly paid public officials in the state. The implications for this are big. And the public watching that meeting saw the board go into executive session for, I don't know, what was it, 2 hours or so? And they come out and just announce, okay, we got a plan, we're transitioning away. There was no discussion on why. There was no discussion on what led up to this. Nothing. And so I guess when I hear them say, oh, we're not moving on, this was a transition, like, well, maybe if you spend some time describing to us what you're doing in a public setting, in a public meeting, maybe we would know.
Yeah. Well, let me take a try at it then, because the chair Mahalik, asked me to do the interview because, I know more than anybody else, right? But first off, I just want to thank the board because they are a citizen board and they take this time, other than a per diem account for a sandwich and some gas money, they do a really hard job, which if you look at the amount of subcommittee meetings, academic affairs, budget, finance, audit, they own every square inch of all the universities, every single appointment. So I want to thank them, for their leadership and what they're doing. But this is a transition plan. Like you've observed, I want to thank you. You're always very accurate reporting, others less so. That I've been reappointed for 6 more months to go through the legislative session to implement the Envision 2035 conceptual framework, which we've spent a year plus working on. So I'm just honored to lead us through that. And then probably shortly after the legislature wraps up, they will then start the search for a replacement to be done in December 2025, if not before. So it is a transition plan. And I can tell you, I'm just honored as well to transition back to academia. I can tell you that on the 9th of June, my wife and I, she just come back from visiting our newest grandchild. We have 4. And, we talked about, well, how long do you stay as chancellor? Because this baby now, if you stay 4 years, it's 4-year-old, you're going to miss so much. So how can we think about the future? And the next step I had on there was to become a professor of this transformative Dakota Digital Academy on the subjects of artificial intelligence and human security. And it is going to be such a profound issue. The board, even across 9 study groups said artificial intelligence will be the most complicated challenge. And I just met with a study group with a whole bunch of agencies 2 days ago, across the government, of how we're going to approach AI. So it all fits together. And of course, some people, there was a board member who voted against me last year. And I find out if not everybody's happy with me, then that's probably good. Because if everybody's happy, then we're probably not making any hard choices. And if there's some disputes, that's a good sign of this rural-urban divide we have, east-west. You've written about this very astutely, right? We've got big, powerful counties with lots of people. And we have Botno, right? How do we make sure we take care of all of North Dakotans, of, arguably the 3rd most rural state in America, right? This isn't New York City where they can just have these big colleges in an urban area. We have to balance that. And that's what the chancellor does. Everybody else is optimized to look for their own campus. And I'm the person that has to try to bring together a holistic vision. And that's what Envision 35, if we want to talk about that too. So that's, I just want to get that out there in the front. A transition, and I'm very excited to continue to teach and help us adapt. And on that point, the board did approve last June a digital literacy requirement for every student of the 50,000. So there's going to be a lot of teaching about digitization and AI going forward. But I'll stop there.
Chancellor Hagerott, I think you've sort of said before we started recording that you don't necessarily agree with the term you were ousted when you got a 6-month extension. But there is, looking at your sort of transition out and what's going to happen after those 18 months with this professorship, what's happened with Dean Bershani, same sort of thing, high salaried academic folks. I think it's safe to sort of describe these as golden parachutes into retirement, right? I mean, you're getting a large salary. That same sort of bridge is not given to the faculty at Dickinson State that are being cut. And so I think that you probably will see some frustration about you getting this 18-month runway plus the professorship making the salary you do. What would you say to folks who are like, Chancellor Hagerott, Dean Brashani, these guys are getting some sweetheart deals here while we're cutting positions at our universities?
No, thank you for the question. There were board members who actually wanted to give me tenure. And I said, no, I don't want tenure. I want to be performing. And if I'm performing and the students are enrolling and I'm getting research grants, then you keep me. And if not, you send me away. So, the other person you spoke of has a lifetime appointment, right? This is a 3-year performative contract. And it's actually almost identical to what I had at the Naval Academy. Hey, we're going to make you the deputy director of the Cyber Center on a 3-year contract. We'll come back and visit. You have to have enough time to plan, right? Build courses and do stuff. And if it doesn't work out, then it's not, a long-term type of arrangement that you previously mentioned. So
going into that board meeting earlier this week where they made the decision to move on or transition, I guess. Prior to that, I mean, was it your intention that you wanted to transition? Whose decision was that? I mean, if they had offered you, because for people not understanding, you and the university presidents essentially get rolling 3-year contracts, and then every 2 years the contracts get renewed for another 3 years. If they'd offered you another 3-year contract, would you have taken it?
Well, I'm actually going to share with you. I mean, I'll put it, since this is not going to be shared. The conversations were shared, but our images here aren't. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
My wife and I, we'd have our 4th grandchild. So on the 9th of June, right, we sat down to strategize. And these were, the Navy has a thing called approach to strategy. What are the ends you're pursuing? What are the ways you want to get there? And what are your means, right? And I have on here, looking out, I'm in my early 60s, but the military, that's kind of a mandatory retirement. Civil servants can stay till wherever, but the military, unless you're the chief of naval operations, you're going at about the old 65, right? I said, what do I want to do? Have an influence in my grandchildren's lives. I have 4 grandchildren. My grandfather on the farm was profoundly influential. Number 2, provide for my elderly parents. My mom and dad are pushing 90, incredible healthies. I can look out at his farm right from here. Number 3, help North Dakota and our kids adapt to the emergence of artificial intelligence. The governor talked about his 3 priorities in his budget speech were tech debt, total alignment, robotic revolution, and 3, AI augmentation. I'm totally aligned with the governor, right? And I can do something to help North Dakotans. 5th was to help the U.S. Navy. We are in a crisis, and it came in the debates. We are in an epic crisis, and I'm on the board, the advisory, the Secretary of the Navy, if I continue to help. And last was to help my church, help kids. That's my goals. And the next page was, what would I do? And I wrote down, when do I finish as chancellor? And I would like to be a professor of the DDA. And there it says the top one is a professor at the DDA. Okay, so I'm very happy, and I'm honored to be able to get through the session. But obviously, you knew some people voted against me last time. There's some people that want me to do more for particular areas, right? I'm taking a holistic view, and there's going to be tensions. Each mayor, each set of legislators are incentivized to just help their town or their school. And if I can use a military analogy, when I was in Afghanistan, I was a senior naval officer. I was a commander of the Navy detachment. And there's rivals of the Army and the Navy and the Air Force. But I'll tell you, if there was an Army guy on duty or a Navy guy at the gate, we wanted them to succeed because we were all protected at Camp Eggers by them. We wanted all to succeed. And that's the culture I take into the North Dakota. We want all North Dakota to succeed. But I'm mindful that each campus has legislative allies and mayors, and sometimes the chancellor's holding them back to help a smaller campus, right? Or I'm helping UND and NDSU come together. There was a time when the president of NDSU and UND would not even meet for dinner. And I compelled the two to sit down. You can probably remember which personalities they were, right? I said, the state of North Dakota is bigger than either one of your egos. And the two presidents are doing remarkable. Cook and Armacost are a gift to North Dakota. Neither one of them are from here. And it's a new world of them working together. So that's the tension you're picking up, and it's very predictable.
Chancellor Hagerott, it seems to me like the university chancellor job in North Dakota has a shelf life, right? I mean, it's not like people have long, the long tenures in this job. Can you talk about, how long you've been in this position compared to some of your predecessors? that type of thing. Because I think, the tension you're talking about, the rural, urban, east, west, NDSU, UND, I mean, eventually, right, you can't keep everybody happy. So is it the transition of this position, is this a normal timeline? Have you stayed longer than most people?
Yeah. I'm told, other than Larry Isaac, I think I'm the longest serving chancellor. So you could double check my numbers. But remember, and Rob, you reported, it was chaos when I arrived. There had been 4 chancellors in 3 years. And I'm close friends with one of our major city mayors. He goes, your major accomplishment, and he, like many people, I don't get this cyber thing, I don't get anything, but you stabilized a statewide approach. You helped adjudicate tensions. You brought in new presidents at Dickinson. We were blessed to have President Easton, right? I had to help shepherd out that president. We all know about Mark Kennedy, shepherding him out, right? And for 10 years, we really weren't having the knockdown, drag out issues. And so that's one of, I think, the big accomplishments is stability, because the people of North Dakota don't need drama in this office, right? If it's a boring chancellor's office, that's a good thing. So yeah, you can check the numbers, but I think Larry Isaac was the longest serving, and I'm number 2 when I finish out at 10 and a half years.
I think that's right. I mean, I think we put some oil on the waters. I mean, higher ed was chaotic when you came in, and it's less so now. I feel like we do have some good leaders at particularly some of our prominent institutions. It's really difficult to me, though, when it comes back, and it's such an abrupt decision. If your trajectory was heading towards essentially retirement or starting to scale back, I mean, there was no announcement of it beforehand. There was no signaling of the intent. All of this discussion took place behind closed doors. And some of the things you're telling me, I don't understand why those can't be discussed in an open meeting. Why does all this have to be behind closed doors all the time?
Well, yeah, if I could, thank you for that question. Part of it is, if the cameras are rolling, then people, are less willing to talk about the pros and cons of transitioning now versus later. Because one of the things I can tell you, if you look closely at when we transition presidents, it's typically odd years. You finish the legislative session and you start the search. Kennedy left in 19. The NDSU president left in 21. I mean, the contract was not renewed. Dickinson left just after legislative session, at least the transition began. BSC, Scogan announced after the session. So the strategy is typically have a coordinated, integrated legislative partnerships with and we're going to have a new governor, and then announce next year. In this case, I'll go through all those things. We basically, announced a little bit earlier than the normal cycle. So, but people, want to weigh stuff. I mean, there are people who didn't want me to go become a professor. I'll be up front, right? They're like, you're doing great. I mean, you saw my eval, meets or exceeds all expectations. North Dakota, in my tenure, we have the highest graduation rate ever. It grew 8% while I was here. We have a record number of high school kids. We have recovered retention from COVID. We beat the national averages 4 years. Minnesota's down 29% in the last time span. In the last 5 years, we're down 7% on enrollment. So there were people who said, we don't want you to retire. And I talked about my family, my kids, and then I just said, I have a passion. I think the biggest event in history is now happening, which is artificial intelligence. And the governor is even saying that. The president sent out a 100-page executive order on it. It's epic stuff, and I think I could do more helping that.
So let me circle back, because what you said was essentially, they're not going to be as, I guess I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially they're not going to be as candid if they're speaking in public. Is that fair? And that's one of the problems I have, because when I go back and I read the evaluations of even some of the evaluations of presidents where there were clearly problems and we clearly moved on from them, I mean, the evaluations were completely uncritical. And when I read yours, I mean, they were nothing but laudatory. There was nothing in there to indicate that there was any constructive criticism or anything. I think I said they were so saccharine they could give you diabetes. I mean, I don't know what the point, and I'm not trying to run you down. I mean, you did a great job. I mean, I'm not being critical of the job you're doing. I'm just wondering, what is the point of hiding any sort of criticism or any sort of skepticism or anything behind closed doors? I mean, it feels like like the Board of Higher Ed, whether we're talking about these evaluations that are public record or whether we're talking about the meetings, it's like they put on a show for the public while the real business gets done behind closed doors. I don't think that's the spirit of our open meetings laws.
Well, and I know you read the documents. There's a multi-page evaluation of me in excruciating detail, right? Self-assessment, numbers, things where we fell short on some things that we did better. Then there's a survey, which you've seen from the board members. They can write comments, and some like he needs to do more on this and more on that. Then my board chair himself. So all of that is public. It's when you go in the room and people want to say more maybe connective things with a person. If the cameras are rolling, it's just different. And we protect, so many events are protected. The president's been protected in executive session. I was added later. It's just helpful. Look at our world, right? It's like the Heisenberg effect. If people are observing you, then you're less willing to say things. It's a natural thing. And that's why, what does the Bible say? Chastise in private, compliment in public or something, it's age-old wisdom from Moses, right? And that's what that's about. But I think our system's pretty, you can read everything, all the evals and the data, it's all there. But when they want to actually then literally sit across from a human being going, this is the thing, they want to be able to do that without the cameras on. So,
but Chancellor Hagerott, that's the same sort of reasoning legislators use to not have cameras in committee rooms or not have cameras on the floor and that kind of thing. I understand why the Board of Higher Ed, who, by the way, I agree with you, underpaid, work way harder than they should. I don't know why anybody'd want these jobs. I understand why they would want the system to be like that, but I'm not sure that's good for the public or that's good for people who work for the university system, right? I understand the desire to have candid conversations, but under that theory, then the legislature should not have cameras. City commission should not have these sort of conversations in the public, that type of thing. Can you see why people would be a little uncomfortable with this?
Well, you're talking about personal contract negotiations and things like that. I think many of our civic organizations, they have protections as well when they actually get into contract negotiations. And that's what you're talking about. When, we've recruited incredibly talented people, right? Doug Jensen of Bismarck came out of Chicago. Easton was a former dean of the Wyoming Law School, Stanford grad, the two research presidents. I could go on to the talent. Well, the Williston president we poached out of California. They have to know when they come here, if they have somebody that wants to denigrate them, they're in executive session, right? It's not playing to the cameras because everyone's going to have some enemies, right? It's just natural. So I think we balanced it pretty well that all the records are open, the evals are open, the data's open, but then they get a chance to close the doors and talk about stuff, But, the voters can always change stuff, but I just say the evidence is, I just read the statistics off, record graduation rates, retentions recover, we're beating Minnesota, and my heart goes out to Minnesota. They probably locked down too hard, and I credit the governor and our board chair. We were the first state in the upper Midwest to come back, right? And you know how many kids died in COVID? 0 out of 50,000, 0, right? And I know Rawport, you had a near miss, but, you're a lot younger than me, but North Dakota stood up for the kids, and so I think the system has done a remarkable job, but yeah, there's this tension between urban, rural, east, west, oil country, and everybody else that uses oil country's money, right? I've heard that a lot. I was up with Mayor Klug. That guy is a natural leader. I went up to the Williston town meeting, and they're like, we are building infrastructure across the state, but they've got to take care of us. And that's why Williston and Grand Energy, led by Kevin Black, is a top priority of the board. Grand Energy to produce what we need for the energy sector, because it's where we get the surpluses here. Well, a lot of people never been up to Williston. I had one reporter, not you, Rob, but one reporter a couple of years ago was writing about oil country, and I said, well, what do you think when you see it? And she admitted she'd never driven up there. I said, the conversation's over till you drive to Williston, because they are taking care of the rest of our state.
I have spent a lot of time in Williston, too much time.
Yeah, sorry, yes. Those people on the front line of wealth creation. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, there was a time I worked so much before obviously my time as a reporter, I worked so much in Williston, I considered getting like a second apartment there. That's how much time I spent in Williston. Fine city, by the way. I guess it's I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to agree, and maybe that's the tension between the news media and the governing boards is that we want to see more. And I worry because we see it a lot. I mean, so we see it at the local level too, where all of a sudden a park district director is out all of a sudden, and then it's like our job to figure out ex post facto why. Why couldn't they just say why during the meeting? You know,
I mean, Rob, I'm here for 18 more months.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. One of my military friends reached out. You know, I've got a lot of veteran friends.
You were already, I mean, a year of that though was a sunk cost. That was already on your contract.
Yeah, but I would say I was extended through the legislative session. So I'm saying a termination is, you know, terminated for cause like today. The board can do that.
Sure.
They cannot renew your contract and start the search at the meeting. Instead, it's like, with these evals, with these numbers that said meets or exceeds expectations, right? And I just read a bunch of stuff off. Hey, we want you to get this legislative session. We'll add 6 months, and we want you to stay on to help develop digital literacy for our students. I mean, just to share with you, and again, I know your listeners' eyes are going to glaze over. I have a book chapter coming out in Johns Hopkins Press on the digital transformation of higher education. It's the only chapter in like 15. I'm speaking in July at a national convention of chancellors of the whole country on how do small states adapt to this emergence, right? And the governor, Governor Burgum is a gift, and we're going to lose him because he has a vision of this. You know, in fact, I'll just say this on the air. I hope he's the vice president nominee, but if he's not, he needs to be the new secretary of technology, education, and labor. They need to make a hyper department about the emergence of artificial intelligence, of which he's eminently qualified, education systems, K-12 higher, and then how the labor markets. I mean, that's how big what's happening, and that's why I'm honored to help teach, and I'm teaching a class at NDSU on basically the artificial intelligence emergence. You know, with Dr. Dennis Cooley. So if you want to sign up for that class, it's in the NDSU catalog. It's called Artificial Intelligence in Society: the History and Philosophy of the Human and Machine. It's going to be the biggest thing in history. Okay, and so I really am an academic. And also my book is under contract. You know, that was the other controversy. I'm using my developmental leave the first time in 9 years, right? It was all authorized 5 years ago. So you really have an academic who wants to come back to teaching and help the kids of North Dakota and adult learners. And please audit my class, both of you, okay?
I may audit your class. In fact, I want to ask you this question. Now that we've kind of pounded through all the hard stuff, in your capacity as an expert about artificial intelligence, how do we stop artificial intelligence from stealing my work and regurgitating it to other people for pay while I'm not getting paid anything for it?
Hey, Rob, do you see my title? Artificial Intelligence and Human Security. You are exactly right. How do we preserve security for human employment, their privacy, their well-being? It is an epic issue. It's not like artificial intelligence and let's make cyber-secure computers. It's about you and exactly what you said. And I think a lot of our elites are not playing fair with rural areas. I'll just tell you this right now. There was some comment by people like, he travels a lot. I'm on the National Commission in Washington, D.C. about the future of higher ed. The report's going to go to Congress and to the president. And I'm sitting in this room, and this big city university president, incredibly powerful, says, not knowing him at the table, we need to phase out these rural EPSCoR research programs because they can't get to scale. And I confront this person, and her face went beet red because it exposed the power being exerted against rural states. They want to extract our oil, extract our information, these data centers, extract our food, and then basically they call us the candy jar to take our talent. I was in another meeting. We're the candy jar of talent, and they pick our best people. And that's why I'm dedicated to help rural states. And you get I'll put my money where my mouth is. Our system, and Armacost was a key ally. We created the first consortium of its like in the country, the Mountain Plains University Research Consortium, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, working with Governor Burgum and Hoban to compete for the CHIPS Act. And then, God bless him, Tester took the post to Missoula. So this is my larger vision of taking care of rural people and urban and the Midwest and rural states. And I've been honored to do it in this job, but now I think I can better do it teaching and visit my grandchildren, take care of my parents. So that's the real story, you know. But as you know, there's at least one board member who I'm not on his Christmas card list, right? I mean, that's just reality. You know?
Well, Mark, I think we'll leave it there. Did you want to name the board member? I guess I got to ask that question.
Sorry. I respect all of them seriously. I mean,
maybe if the meeting had been open, we'd all know. We could just know.
No. They are all good people. But I'll tell you, this is why Envision 2035 is so crucial. Okay, if I could just say this, it comes to a narrative we're trying to build with an all-state effort called Run ND, Retool Upskill Now for Better North Dakota. And the three sides of the pyramid and then a base is workforce in agriculture, energy, healthcare, and national security. We are in a emergent arms race, and North Dakota can help. The other side is student vitality. We need students with a strong mind that's critical thinking, like you guys, a strong body that's drug-free. I've stood against sports gambling and everything else that could degrade our children's health. And then a resilient spirit, which is North Dakota values, right? And then the base of this is intelligent machines. And that's what the governor said in his speech. We would need AI augmentation. But all of that is under a tech infrastructure of both the physical buildings and that. So we have a vision of the future. It's called Run ND. We need the legislature on board, the new governor, whether it's Pepcorn or Armstrong, as all of state, and then recognizing each campus can have its personalities and its strengths, but we've got to work all together as a rural state. And that's my vision. And I'm glad to keep doing that for another 18 months with the board and the new governor and legislature. So,
Chancellor,
there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And to come back anytime, as many times as you guys want.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
All right, just finished up our interview with Chancellor Hagerott. And I mean, listen, it's not on me to question the guy's plans for his life, right? He wants to move on. He wants to do other things. I mean, if that's it, it's not that. And I'm not against the idea of moving on. He's been there for a while. You know, he's of the chancellors of the people who have served in that position, he served one of the longest. So I'm not saying they've made the wrong decision or that. I just, what frustrates me is when it just happens abruptly, and it seems like all the really candid stuff happens behind the scenes. And if you really want to learn what happened, you have to go and you have to, get a bunch of documents, and you have to try to read between the lines of maybe the criticism that they're trying to put in there. Because I'll tell you, I mean, if there were problems or something, it's hard to discern these problems because they don't put anything in a public light because and the argument is, well, these are big, distinguished people, and they're not going to want to come to North Dakota if they're going to get criticized in public. Well, I'll tell you what, if you don't want to get criticized in public, don't go into public service.
Yeah, and don't take my taxpayer dollars to do it, right? And I also think, evaluations of employees, no matter if it's a management level or an employee, they're an important tool to try to get employees to perform better. So if they're just this thing that you just get rubber stamped, you're doing a great job, and then all of a sudden magically, if it wasn't for you doing a report and hearing about that they're going to go into executive session to potentially fire them, would anybody have known until after the meeting was over that they were even thinking about doing this?
No, it would have come as a surprise, a complete surprise. And again, it doesn't just happen at the North Dakota University system.
Well, it's not.
How many times is some local you find out somebody gets canned, and then 3 weeks later it's like, oh, they were embezzling a bunch of money. What?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not suggesting anything like that is happening with Chancellor Hagerott. I mean, I think if he was pretty candid in mentioning that there's at least one board member that he's not getting along with so much. And I'll be honest, I don't know who that would be. I have guesses, but I don't care to guess.
Well, and he name dropped quite a few of the board members. I'm guessing it's none of those that he name dropped throughout the thing.
Probably.
Yeah. But I'm also struggling a little bit. I understand him saying that he talked to his wife about transitioning to this new stage and whatever. We never really got an answer. Was it his decision?
All right.
A 6-month extension? Did he want a longer extension? Did people on the board want no extension? Right? I mean, we don't know what folks wanted. And again, I appreciate him wanting to transition to this other part of his life. By the way, I would like a professorship that pays $450,000 a year.
Well, I do have a copy of his new contract. He's not going to be paid $450,000 in the professorship. So
Okay, good,
In
good.
fact, hey, let's get the facts out here.
But that was the fact with Brashani, right? Brashani kept the same salary, I thought.
No, he got a reduced salary as well, but he also got tenure. So he's got, and he started off with like a year-long sabbatical or something like that, so he could think about this one class that he's going to teach. Only in academia do they get away with stuff like that, by the way. Good Lord. I wish somebody would pay me for a year to sit around and think about doing my job.
Some people would suggest you do get paid to sit around and think. You just have to put those into words.
I do have to produce things, right? I do have to be productive. Okay, so he's going to continue until okay, here. Now I'm reading the contract on the so until December 31st, 2025. So the 18 months that are remaining on his contract now, he's going to be paid his base salary of $440,996. After December, on December 1st, 2025, he will transition to a salary of $165,000 a year for that professorship at the Dakota Digital Academy. So that's what's happening there.
Yeah.
And again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Does this Dakota Academy thing exist already? Or is it still being formed?
I need to look at that. I think that's something that they've created somewhat recently, but I don't really know much about it, to be honest with you.
I also think, I wanted to ask him, and I'm sure he would not have given a straight answer. He's talking about the tension between small and big, and do we have too many universities? Do we have too many colleges? I think that, as the world is changing and more things are online and whatever, I don't think I support it at this point, but I think it's a conversation we should be having.
Can we consolidate? Are we duplicate? I mean, and we've been having that debate about the university system forever. And part of the problem is, there's parochialism in there. Those universities have a lot of nice paying government jobs in those communities, and it brings in, they bring in students that has that creates commerce. It creates tax revenue. There's a lot of but institutional higher education doesn't exist to keep the local convenience store open.
Right.
Anyway, that's a whole other podcast. Let's talk about the debate last night. We talked about it a little bit. I think you will agree with me, and I say this with all kindness to Joe Biden, who I disagree with on policy, but I do not buy into this idea that Republicans are pushing that he's a dictator and all these other terrible things. I think he's just a Democrat president who I mostly disagree with, who is otherwise just another American whatever. I wish him the best. The person who was on debate last night does not, setting aside Donald Trump and everything else, right, he did not present himself as the sort of man who is up to the rigors of that job, and that is deeply concerning to me.
So I think that, as I sort of alluded to earlier in the show, unlike people who support the other guy, I think it's important that we admit that was a really terrible performance for Joe Biden last night. And I think it wasn't just the answers, it was also the weakness of the voice, sort of the appearance. It was all around that it was the nightmare. It was the nightmare performance, right?
Losing track of his thoughts.
Right. And there seems to be on the left this morning, this idea, well, all is lost and, oh my God, we're going to lose everything. And then on the other side, it's like, well, how many swing voters are out there saying, I'm going to leave the old guy because he confirmed that he's old last night to go to the convict. And I just don't know the answer to that. What I do know is I'm confident last night was a concerning night for the Biden campaign and people like me who support Joe Biden.
I'm upset. Trust me, I wasn't voting for either of these people to begin with.
Right.
I'm not going over to the convict. And Donald Trump didn't have a great night. He lied constantly. It's the same old show from him. So, on content, and Joe Biden did some embellishments and stuff like that as well. But
I would say Joe Biden did the normal level of embellishment on a presidential debate.
Trump that we have to do that. Yeah. He's within the guardrails of the normal amount of lying to politics.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's so terrible. I'm so disappointed that these are our choices. I feel like America deserves better choices than this. I don't think anybody won that debate last night. I think America lost last night. I mean, looking at that was terrible. We need bad. I mean, the Republicans should have picked somebody who's not a criminal. The Republicans should have picked somebody who doesn't think that the people who attacked Congress on January 6th are unbelievable patriots. And Democrats should have picked somebody. They should have looked at Joe Biden and said, listen, one term's enough. You know, we've got to move on. We've got to have somebody who is frankly younger and is physically and mentally more up to this job. And don't forget, not that long ago, we had the special counsel, Robert Hur, issued that report, and he talked about, one of the, what was it? It was related to his handling of documents, right? And essentially said, you can't charge him with a crime because his defense can just be he's so scatterbrained. If you go back, and there was a ton of pushback from Democrats and a ton of pushback from the Biden administration, but last night the American people were confronted with exactly what Robert Hur wrote in his report. That was it.
What's interesting to me is thinking back to January at the State of the Union speech when Biden performed, right? I mean, he looked like he had energy and he looked like, and last night it was like a different person. So, I've heard some criticism that, why did they agree to this debate? Why would they put him out there? Whatever. I think he had a really bad night, and I don't think his good days are necessarily that high. So when he has a bad day, it's really, really bad. At the end of the day, I think Joe Biden is a nice man who cares very much about the future of this country, who looked very, very old and potentially problematically so last night.
I'm afraid that there's hubris at play here, and the sort of hubris that is not uncommon in politics are people who just are holding on too long. I mean, look at the disaster I'm not brokenhearted that conservatives got control of the Supreme Court, but look at the disaster that redounded from Ruth Bader Ginsburg being unable to let go of that job. Look at, and then we could talk about Senator Dianne Feinstein, who basically was in office until death.
Strom Thurmond. We could go down
the list. This is not good. And I don't. Maybe I'm not a Democrat, so I'm on the outside looking in. Why? And it's not like you're in the Oval Office, but I don't understand. Why was this resistance to moving on from Joe Biden?
It's very, very difficult for me to come up with a scenario where a group of Democrats or Democrat leaders would have the juice to tell a sitting president, you can't run for re-election. I've said from the beginning, there's two people who are involved in this decision. It's Joe Biden and Jill Biden who are making this determination. I think anything beyond that, I just don't think that there's going to be enough power to move this along. If I could go back and again, we're talking a lot about Joe Biden. We had,
but I don't think it. Let me push back on that because I don't think it's just up to them. Another Democrat could have put themselves forward during the primary process that started earlier this year.
Dean Phillips did. You got 1% in New Hampshire.
Okay, but maybe somebody with a little more prominence than Dean Phillips could have come forward, and Democratic influencers and people in positions of power within the party and elected office could have coalesced around that person. They could have made the decision as a party to move on, and they didn't. They stuck with Biden. And the problem I'm having is one thing that I do agree with Democrats on is that Donald Trump is an existential threat to the American Republic. The things that he wants to do, the way he talks, he is a threat to our country. If you believe that, how did you stick with this guy thinking that he's going to beat him?
Yeah, I hope that's not a question that you expect me to be able to answer because
I'm sorry, I'm not like shouting at you,
but I also think that last time was really, really, really bad.
Yeah,
I don't know that it's been that bad in the past, and so again, you're the Democrat who says this guy's got to go, this sitting president's got to go. I'm going to put myself up here. There's not a lot of people who are going to take on the White House and ruin their whole future careers if they lose, right? So let's say somebody steps into the space, challenges Biden for the primary, they take out Biden, and then they lose to Donald Trump. Or, they hurt Biden so much during the primary that Biden loses to Donald. that is a real big, and I understand what you're saying. It's the future of the country and all those different things. But I think that's probably the calculus that's going through people's heads. One, we don't want to believe it's as bad as it is. And two, I'm too nervous to risk my political future.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what's going on. I mean, even on the Republican side, is people thinking about their careers before they're thinking about the country, which you could say about a whole bunch of Republicans who know better, Doug Burgum, who know better. I know you know better, who are still supporting Donald Trump because that's the path of least resistance politically. I mean, that's really what kind of led us towards Donald Trump and Joe Biden, is everybody's just taking the path of least resistance. Nobody wants to say stand up and say, you know what? The emperor's naked. The emperor's got no clothes.
Yeah, and we're talking, and I think the national pundits are probably rightfully so talking a lot more about Joe Biden today than Donald Trump. But to your point earlier, it's not like Donald Trump had a great night. It's not like Donald Trump was up there looking presidential when they're having who's the worst president of all time and what's your golf handicap? To your point of who won last night, maybe RFK Jr. I mean, maybe RFK Jr. won last night.
Suddenly he looks sane. And that's
no.
Sane. Okay, that's correct. Okay, thank you for correcting me. You're right. He looks more palatable.
No,
maybe that's. He looks more vigorous. He looks young. I mean, he's long in the tooth too. Gosh. Yeah. I mean, when they started carping at each other about their golf scores, I'm just imagining where are we right now? This everybody's losing. This is terrible.
But this is America, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't this sort of what we deserve?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you look at some of the polling, a majority of Americans don't really like either of these candidates. So, I mean, did they show up for the process? Did they, or are they just sitting at home grumbling at their television screens and then going to bed and not doing anything to fix the problem?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm so deeply, deeply disappointed. I mean, this election cycle was a real opportunity, I think, for Democrats to find a candidate who could unite the country. And they put all their chips on Joe Biden. And 20 years ago, maybe Joe Biden's that guy. But he's not that guy today. And there were indications, Chad. I mean, again, we had the special prosecutor report from Robert Hur, and they completely dismissed it. And there are people who are meeting with Joe Biden every day, right? He's not in some secret enclave most of the time where nobody could see him, right? There are people who work with him every day, who meet with him every day, who have to know that he's having, I don't doubt that he's having good days.
Right.
But I also know that he's having bad days. And what happens if the bad day is a day when we really need our president?
But rank and file Democrats aren't seeing that. They didn't see it until last night.
Yeah. Well,
and this is somebody that they've known, I mean, through 8 years of the Obama administration. He's on the national stage when he's in the Senate. It's somebody that they know and frankly, have trusted in people. And before he became president, everybody liked Joe Biden. I mean, Lindsey Graham loved Joe Biden, right? I mean,
as a person,
and so,
sure, yeah.
Yeah, as a person, yeah, of course. What a concept, right? To be able to like the person, even though if you disagree.
I still love the fact when you see pictures of like Anthony Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg like riding an elephant together on vacation together. Right? That was great. Like these two fierce judicial minds who are on completely opposite ends of the spectrum were best pals. I love that.
Yeah, and because they probably got a kick out of fighting with each other because they're both smart and all those kind of things.
Ron Paul and Chad Oban on both sides of the...
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would put me or you in quite that category. But hey, if you have access to an elephant, let's go ride it.
You want to go ride? Yeah, I would ride an elephant with you. Why not? Maybe even a camel.
Yeah. But I mean, the overall point, I will admit I did not make it through the whole debate last night. I made it through very little of the debate because it was pretty clear early on how the night was going to go. I think Biden's probably first 15 minutes were 15 of the worst minutes I've seen on a presidential debate stage in my lifetime.
I would say he did get a little better, but not much. I mean, he set the bar low, and then later he maybe barely got over it.
Well, and again, but you've got Donald Trump up there saying, God knows what. I mean, couldn't even answer the question, what if he'll accept the results of this election? I mean, it is a scary time.
It is. And the thing that scares me about Trump is we're so used to that. We're just sort of a nerd to it. Like, of course Trump lied. Of course he refused to say if he was going to. Of course he dissembled when he was asked to condemn political violence. Of course all these things, because that's just Donald Trump. And what really worries me is the people who are going to decide this election are people who haven't really been following this stuff, right? The people who follow it closely, their minds are probably made up about Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I don't know that there's a lot of people who really follow politics closely who are on the fence at this point. So it's the people who are on the fence, or the people who are, let's say, maybe more lightly informed than the rest of us. And I don't know that they're going to be spending a lot of time parsing the details of what Donald Trump said, or trying to discern, what Joe Biden was saying in his raspy mumblings. I think what they're going to look at is just a very top-line perception. And on one side, they're going to see a very vigorous, outspoken candidate. And on the other, somebody who was struggling to string sentences together.
Yeah, I mean, I think vigorous is being compared to his opponent. Yes,
relatively vigorous to, yeah.
Yeah, but like the whole thing about Donald Trump talking about, a shark attacking him with a battery in a boat, whatever that nonsense was a couple of weeks ago. Like, nobody, he stands up on a stage and just talks nonsense, like he's having some sort of, acid flashback, and nobody really reports on it, right? It's just, that's what he does when he's on stage, or nobody cares. I hate to blame the press for not reporting on it, but it's just, to your point earlier, it's just acceptable. Shifting gears, but staying in the presidential race, I just want to mention one other thing. I think Doug Burgum calling Joe Biden a dictator and using that type of language in our elections is offensive and dangerous, to start comparing Joe Biden to real dictators around this world. And I wish he wouldn't do it.
It's dangerous. I think that's the right word for it. And the reason why it's dangerous is, if Joe Biden's a dictator, if he really is, and by the way, Burgum doubled down on it. Like he was asked about it in subsequent interviews and defended making that argument. And the problem is if you're really living under a dictatorship, then you're justified in overthrowing that dictatorship, right? Like that is a founding principle of the American Republic. The American revolutionaries, Thomas Jefferson wrote from time to time, the tree of liberty has to be watered by the blood of tyrants. And if you're talking about an actual tyrant, then okay, count me in, right? If you're talking about Stalin or somebody, but Joe Biden is not a dictator.
Well, he certainly didn't look like a dictator last night.
I'll tell you where my bar is right now for presidential candidates is, we'll leave office when their term is over, per the Constitution, right? And I know one of these candidates who gets over that bar, and the other not so much.
Well, let's make clear for the listeners. You're talking about Joe Biden will leave office.
Yes.
At the end of his term.
Joe Biden would abide by the Constitution and would afford his successor a peaceful transition of power. Donald Trump won't, and we know that because he didn't.
Well, and he tells us he's not going to, right? I mean, again, he won't just say, I will accept the results of the election. And he's still, again, last night, doubling down in 2020 was stolen and all these different things. Just think back to January 6th of 2021. Can you believe we are here? Can you believe that the betting odds are that Donald Trump is going to get reelected president? Can you believe we're here?
No.
It doesn't make any sense.
I think if I told me just coming out of COVID, that nearly killed me. I don't know if people understand what a visceral experience that was. And there was a lot of people who was like, have accused me of, including some friends and things like that, have accused me of I'm a liberal now, and I changed because I went to work for the Forum, and they started telling me what to write and all this stuff. First of all, I don't think my principles have changed. But I will tell you what made me turn and realize what was happening in the Republican Party is I watched January 6th on television. And I was so angry to see somebody waving the Confederate flag, the flag of traitors, in our Congress, when I was seeing our elected officials running for their lives because people are on the outside. And I understand some of the people in that crowd got taken along for the ride. but there were dangerous people who were organizing themselves into military formations, who planned for this, who showed up with zip ties and handcuffs and nooses, right? Those are the people that Donald Trump is calling unbelievable patriots these days. And it's disgusting, and it should immediately, how he became the Republican nominee again, it boggles my mind. I don't know. I think we could do a whole other show. I was talking to another friend. I think it's nihilism. I think there's just sort of people have convinced themselves that everything's terrible and it just doesn't matter. So we're just going to send a wrecking ball, and Donald Trump's our wrecking ball.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that there's much to add beyond that. That I can't believe we're in this position. I can't believe that folks that I respect basically want us to believe that, no, it'll be different this time, or January 6th wasn't that bad, and basically saying, don't believe your eyes. Don't believe what you saw. It's all a mirage. This was a peaceful protest, and it was not a mirage.
And I agree with you with that 100%. I kind of feel like Democrats have been doing the same thing to us, though, about Joe Biden's.
I think that might be a fair point of view.
I think there are people around Joe Biden, his family, his staff, his political allies, the people that work with him, that I think maybe have something to answer for, that they could have been more candid about what was going on. And at some point, I don't think it would be bad for my political career if I was the guy to stand up. Look what Liz Cheney did to her political career, but it was the right thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, here's the only option that the Biden folks have, is they need to have him in the public constantly moving forward to show it was a bad night, that he was under the weather. It was a bad night.
But that assumes he's capable of that. That assumes that he's capable of that.
And I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. But you can't get over last night by trying to hide him. But I saw a speech of him at a debate watch party afterwards, where he seemed like a different person. Like he was attacking Trump, and what was frustrating to me is, for what I've heard, like just the blunders and the basic. Like I said, somebody say he was overcoached. The problem wasn't being overcoached last night. I mean, he's asked a question about abortion, he starts talking about immigration, right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and then while Trump's talking and he's just staring vapidly off into space. I mean, I'm sorry, looks matter. I mean, they matter.
You know that since 1960.
Right. We would say since the first televised presidential debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, where John F. Kennedy looked young and fit and vibrant, and Richard Nixon looked like a sweaty old man. I'm not saying that's the only reason JFK won, but that was a pretty big reason.
Yeah, it certainly helped. But I mean, most people would agree that JFK loses that election if that debate is not televised, right? If it's a radio debate or whatever, because he also didn't have the strongest voice, and so he didn't come across the visual meat that mattered.
Yeah,
I mean, it's why people say you and I are so good for this format, because we don't have faces for TV.
That's right. I have done some television in the past. As a matter of fact, when Doug Burgum got in this race, CNN had me do like a segment, and I think they were kind of trying me out to see if he's going to be the vice president, or at the time, if he's going to be on the national stage, we need some local people to talk about him. So I think they were trying me out, at 6:00 p.m. on a Saturday, right? And I don't think I made the cut. There's a reason why they didn't invite me back, and it's because this guy, nobody wants to see this guy in high definition.
This conservative frickin' Yankees fan, nobody wants to see him bearded, balding. I mean, again, after I did the press conferences for Keep It Local, a friend of mine, whose name is Dane DeCray, sent me a text and said, I just saw your face on TV. You should stick with radio. I did use your beautiful face as the cover art for our last podcast episode. I saw that. I want to tell you, I think you look great, Chad. I don't think you should be so hard on yourself. I thought you looked very nice. Wrap it up. Wrap it up right there. Right there. All right. We're gonna put a pin in it. Thank you so much for listening. We do have actually people booked next week. Maybe I could promote a little. But we're off on Friday, right? Celebrating the nation. We're off on Friday. We're going to be celebrating the nation's independence. I took Friday off.
Coming up, we're actually going to have a professor, Jeffrey Bloodworth, who's going to be on. He wrote an article in the Washington Post about Democrats struggling to connect with rural voters, which I thought was really interesting. So we're going to be talking about that on Wednesday. And then, of course, Friday the 5th will be off. Have a great weekend, and we will talk again.